Now listen closely. Most people believe that those who pull away don't want intimacy. That's a lie, a dangerous one, because the truth is far more profound and far more human. The avoidant doesn't withdraw because they don't care. They withdraw because they care too much, and somewhere along the line, intimacy became associated with pain, loss, or suffocation. Their nervous system learned a rule: connection equals danger. And once a rule like that is written into the body, logic alone won't erase it. Here's what they won't say out loud. They want closeness, but not at the cost of their freedom. They want love, but not love that consumes, controls, or collapses their identity. They want to be seen, but not interrogated, held, but not trapped. At their core, avoidants are not cold. They are self-protective visionaries. They learned early that relying on others was risky, so they became strong alone, independent, capable, self-contained. But strength without connection becomes isolation, and isolation over time becomes silent suffering. What they quietly crave is safe intimacy, not intensity, not drama, not emotional flooding, safety. Safety to be imperfect, safety to need space without being punished for it, safety to come closer at their own pace. And here's the breakthrough most people miss. Avoidants don't need to be chased. They need to be anchored. Because when someone stands rooted, calm, secure, grounded, the avoidant nervous system begins to relax. And when the body relaxes, the heart opens naturally. Divine wisdom teaches us that love is patient, not forceful, purposeful, not possessive. True intimacy is not about merging into one. It's about two whole people choosing connection freely. Avoidants desire to be chosen without obligation, loved without pressure, invited without expectation. And when that happens, when intimacy feels like a choice instead of a demand, something extraordinary occurs. The walls don't need to be torn down. They dissolve, slowly, gently, authentically. But here's the higher truth. This journey isn't just about relationships. It's about healing the belief that closeness requires self-betrayal. It's about rewriting the internal story from "I must disappear to be safe" to "I can stay and still be myself." That's transformation. Because the moment an avoidant realizes they don't have to run to survive, they stop running. The moment intimacy feels spacious instead of suffocating, they step into it. And the moment love feels like freedom instead of loss, they choose it with their whole soul. Remember this: distance is not the opposite of love. Fear is. And fear dissolves not through force, but through presence, patience, and purpose. When intimacy becomes a sanctuary instead of a battlefield, even the most guarded heart remembers what it has always wanted: connection. On its own terms, avoidants deeply desire connection, but fear losing themselves in it. That single tension lives at the center of their relational world. On the surface, they may appear independent, self-sufficient, even emotionally unavailable. But beneath that exterior is a human being who wants closeness as much as anyone else, yet has learned, often very early in life, that intimacy comes with a cost. That cost is the fear of disappearing, of being overtaken by another person's needs, expectations, or emotional gravity. For many avoidants, connection once meant overwhelm. Love felt intrusive rather than nurturing. Their emotions were misunderstood, minimized, or demanded before they were ready to give them. So the nervous system adapted. It learned to equate closeness with loss of autonomy. To survive, they built an identity around self-reliance. Independence became not just a trait, but a shield. Over time, the mind formed a silent equation: to stay connected, I must give up myself. And no one willingly walks towards self-erasure. This is why avoidants often crave relationships, but resist the depth that comes with them. They want intimacy in theory, yet panic when it arrives in practice. The closer someone gets, the louder the internal alarm becomes. Not because love is unwanted, but because it feels dangerous to their sense of self. They fear being absorbed, controlled, or reshaped to fit someone else's emotional world. Space, therefore, becomes oxygen. Distance becomes regulation. Pulling away is not rejection. It is self-preservation. What makes this struggle so painful is that the desire for connection never disappears. It lives quietly beneath the need for distance. Avoidants still want to be chosen, understood, and emotionally met. They want partnership, not solitude. But they also want to remain intact, sovereign, and free within that bond. When relationships feel like contracts that demand constant availability, emotional performance, or self-sacrifice, Avoidants instinctively retreat. They are not running from love, they are running from enmeshment. At a deeper level, this fear is spiritual as much as emotional. Human beings are designed for both connection and individuality. When one threatens the other, the soul resists. Avoidants often sense, sometimes unconsciously, that losing themselves in intimacy would violate their inner truth, so they protect that truth fiercely, even if it costs them closeness. This is why they may choose loneliness over relationships that feel consuming. Aloneness feels safer than connection that requires self-betrayal. Yet the longing remains. What avoidants are truly searching for is a form of intimacy where connection does not erase identity, where love expands rather than confines. They want closeness that honors boundaries, curiosity, thank you that replaces control, and presence that does not demand surrender of self. When they sense that they can be loved without shrinking, something inside them softens. The fear begins to loosen its grip, not because they are forced to change, but because they finally feel that connection and selfhood can coexist. Avoidants crave emotional safety more than emotional intensity, even though the world often celebrates intensity as proof of love. Passion, urgency, constant reassurance, and emotional highs may look like connection from the outside, but for an avoidant nervous system, they can feel like chaos. Intensity signals unpredictability. It suggests that emotions could escalate quickly, demands could increase suddenly, and boundaries might dissolve without warning. For someone who learned early that closeness can overwhelm, intensity is not romantic. It is threatening. Emotional safety, on the other hand, speaks directly to the avoidant's deepest need, regulation. Safety means consistency instead of volatility. It means knowing that emotions will not be used as leverage, that conflict will not turn into emotional flooding, and that love will not be withdrawn as punishment. Avoidants are highly sensitive to shifts in emotional tone. A small change in energy, a sudden emotional surge, or an unspoken expectation can activate their instinct to pull away. They withdraw not because they are unfeeling, but because their system is trying to restore balance. This is why avoidants often seem calm or detached in moments when others become expressive. Their calm is not indifference, it is self-protection. Intensity feels like loss of control, and loss of control feels unsafe. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotions were either overwhelming or unreliable, where caregivers were emotionally volatile, intrusive, or inconsistent. Safety, therefore, became synonymous with emotional distance. They learned that staying regulated required staying reserved. Despite this, avoidants do feel deeply. They simply process emotions internally rather than externally. Loud emotions can feel invasive, as if they are being asked to carry not only their own emotional experience, but someone else's as well. Emotional safety allows them to stay present without shutting down. When a relationship offers steadiness instead of urgency, acceptance instead of pressure, the avoidant nervous system begins to trust. Trust is built not through dramatic declarations, but through predictability and respect. Avoidants are drawn to partners who can self-soothe, communicate without escalation, and allow space without resentment. These qualities create an environment where intimacy can grow slowly and organically. Emotional safety tells the avoidant, I don't have to perform to be loved. It reassures them that closeness will not cost them their equilibrium. In safe emotional spaces, avoidants often reveal depth, loyalty, and profound care that surprises those who mistake intensity for connection. There is also a deeper wisdom in this preference. True intimacy is not sustained by emotional highs, it is sustained by emotional reliability. Avoidants intuitively sense this even if they cannot articulate it. They value peace over passion, calm over chaos, and steadiness over fireworks. When love feels safe, they do not need to retreat. They can remain present, engaged, and open because their system is no longer fighting to protect itself. Emotional safety becomes the bridge that allows them to experience closeness without fear. Avoidants long to be accepted without being pressured to change or perform, even though this desire is rarely spoken aloud. Deep inside, there is a fear that love is conditional, that closeness requires them to become someone else, to emote more, give more, or show up in ways that feel unnatural to their inner rhythm. Many avoidants learned early that approval came with expectations. Love felt earned, not given. As a result, they became highly attuned to subtle demands, even unspoken ones, and developed a resistance to anything that feels like emotional obligation. Pressure for an avoidant does not inspire growth, it activates defense. When they sense that their worth in a relationship depends on changing their personality, pace, or emotional expression, they instinctively shut down or pull away. This is not stubbornness or emotional laziness. It is a survival response rooted in the belief that being fully themselves is not enough. Performance becomes exhausting, and exhaustion eventually turns into distance. What avoidants quietly desire is a space where they can exist without being evaluated. They want to be loved in their natural state, quiet, thoughtful, reserved, or independent, without being told directly or indirectly that they should be more expressive, more available, or more emotionally demonstrative. When acceptance is replaced by comparison or critique, intimacy begins to feel unsafe. The avoidant hears a familiar message: who you are is insufficient. And once that message lands, connection becomes a threat to self-worth. This longing for unconditional acceptance is deeply tied to identity. Avoidants often have a strong internal world and a clear sense of self that they protect fiercely. When relationships attempt to reshape that self, even with good intentions, it feels invasive. They are not opposed to growth. They are opposed to growth that is demanded rather than chosen. True growth for an avoidant happens in environments where curiosity replaces criticism and patience replaces pressure. There's also a sacred dimension to this desire. At a soul level, every human being wants to be seen and loved without disguise. Avoidants simply learned that disguises were once necessary for survival. Over time, they became allergic to any dynamic that resembles conditional love. Acceptance without pressure communicates safety. It says, you are welcome here as you are, and change is not the price of belonging. That message relaxes the nervous system and invites genuine openness. When avoidants feel accepted rather than managed, something remarkable happens. They begin to offer more, not because they are asked to, but because they want to. Authentic closeness emerges when they are free from the fear of failing someone's expectations. In that freedom, their capacity for depth, loyalty, and quiet devotion becomes visible. Acceptance does not make them stagnant. It allows them to show up fully, without armor, knowing that love does not require them to perform to be worthy. Avoidants want closeness that feels chosen, not demanded, because autonomy is the foundation of their emotional safety. When intimacy feels like an obligation rather than an invitation, their instinct is to retreat. Requests that carry urgency, expectations that go unspoken but heavily felt, or emotional needs framed as requirements can quickly activate resistance. For the avoidant, demand signals loss of choice, and loss of choice feels like captivity rather than connection. Many avoidants learned early that closeness came with strings attached. Love was conditional, tied to compliance, availability, or emotional labor. Over time, they associated intimacy with pressure. Being needed felt like being consumed. So they developed a deep sensitivity to anything that resembles emotional coercion, even subtle forms such as guilt, disappointment, or silent expectation. When closeness is demanded, the nervous system responds as if freedom is under threat. Choice is what makes intimacy sustainable for avoidants. When they move toward someone freely without force or manipulation, their engagement is genuine and wholehearted. They want to give connection, not surrender it. This distinction is critical. Chosen closeness affirms their agency, demanded closeness erodes it. Even well-intentioned partners may unknowingly trigger avoidance by framing needs in a way that feels like pressure rather than expression. This is why avoidants often pull away when someone says, you should want to spend more time with me, or if you cared, you would. These statements transform love into a test and closeness into proof. For the avoidant, tests feel like traps. They would rather step back than participate in a dynamic where affection is measured, monitored, or owed. They are not rejecting the person. They are rejecting the loss of freedom. At a deeper level, chosen intimacy aligns with a spiritual principle: love must be freely given to remain love. Avoidants intuitively understand this. When connection arises from genuine desire rather than obligation, it feels sacred rather than suffocating. They thrive in relationships where invitations replace ultimatums and where space is respected rather than resented. In such environments, closeness becomes something they move toward naturally, not something they have to defend themselves against. When avoidants feel that their autonomy is honored, their willingness to connect increases. They become more present, more affectionate, and more consistent. Not because they are being pulled, but because they are being trusted. Trust communicates respect for their inner world. It says, "You are free and you are welcome." That message removes the need for distance. Chosen closeness also allows avoidants to experience intimacy as a shared journey rather than a demand for fusion. They can step forward, step back, and return again without fear of punishment. In that freedom, connection deepens organically. The more choice they have, the less they feel the need to protect themselves through withdrawal. Beneath their distance, avoidants carry a profound desire to be understood without explanation, a longing that is often invisible to those around them. Their withdrawal is frequently mistaken for indifference, but in truth, it stems from the tension between needing connection and fearing vulnerability. Avoidants have learned that revealing too much too soon can invite judgment, criticism, or rejection. Over time, this protective strategy becomes internalized, creating a self-reinforcing pattern. The more they protect themselves, the less others perceive the depth of their longing, and the more they feel compelled to protect themselves even further. At the heart of this desire is a yearning for recognition without interrogation. Avoidants want someone to see them as they are, to sense their emotions, and to grasp their needs without requiring an exhaustive verbal explanation. It is not that they are incapable of communicating, rather, they often feel that language cannot fully capture the nuance of their internal world. Words can feel limiting, heavy, or even risky. They fear that articulating their inner state might be met with impatience, misunderstanding, or an expectation that they immediately conform to another's emotional framework. This is why subtle attunement is so vital. Avoidants respond to presence more than to persuasion. When a partner or friend can reflect understanding without demanding a breakdown, when they can acknowledge feelings without pressing for disclosure, the avoidant nervous system relaxes. This relaxation is the gateway to genuine connection. Understanding without explanation communicates trust, safety, and acceptance. It tells the avoidant, you do not have to perform or justify your inner world to be valued. The desire to be understood without explanation also intersects with their sense of autonomy. Avoidants fear that overt emotional disclosure could invite dependency or entanglement that might compromise their independence. By being understood intuitively, they can maintain their sense of self while still experiencing emotional closeness. It allows them to reveal themselves gradually, in a rhythm that feels safe, rather than feeling forced to expose vulnerability prematurely. This gradual unveiling fosters a depth of intimacy that is sustainable, authentic, and deeply rewarding. There is also a spiritual dimension to this desire. At a soul level, humans long to be seen in their essence, beyond the superficial roles, performances, and masks they present to the world. Avoidants in particular have learned that survival often required masking, self-containment, and emotional restraint. Yet beneath the layers of protection, there exists an innate need for resonance and recognition. Being understood without explanation affirms their humanity. It says, I see you, I honor you, you are enough as you are. When this need is met, avoidants experience a profound shift. They feel held without being pressured, visible without being exposed, and connected without being consumed. Their walls begin to soften, not because they are asked to lower them, but because they sense that someone truly perceives their internal reality. This form of understanding becomes the cornerstone of trust, intimacy, and lasting relational depth. It allows avoidants to fully engage in connection while preserving the integrity of their selfhood, creating a space where love is not a demand, but a shared sacred experience. So when we step back and truly see avoidance, not as distant or cold, but as deeply human, self-protective, and longing for authentic connection, we begin to understand a profound truth. Intimacy is not about force, it's about presence. It's not about demanding closeness, but creating a space where closeness can be chosen freely. It's not about changing someone to fit our expectations, but about honoring the sacred balance between connection and autonomy. When we embody patience, compassion, and unwavering respect for boundaries, something extraordinary happens. The walls that once seemed immovable begin to soften. Fear gives way to trust. Resistance transforms into willingness. And in that space, love no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where both hearts can thrive, fully alive and fully free. So remember this, the journey of connection is not about fixing, forcing, or persuading. It's about understanding, accepting, and inviting. It's about being present, steady, and rooted, while others learn to open at their own pace. That is the essence of true intimacy, the kind that honors the soul, expands the heart, and transforms lives. Thank you for listening with an open heart and mind. May you go forward with courage, compassion, and the wisdom to create connections that are not only deep but liberating. Embrace the power of patience, presence, and understanding, and watch how even the most guarded hearts begin to bloom. Thank you. Wishing you love, light, and profound connection. Goodbye.